Hey there. So I just started pulling some tickets from my oracle to see if there was anything to talk about. And what's come out so far is making me think that I'm going to talk about this topic that I've learned something about in my lifetime, that I believe I came to learn about in this lifetime. And I want to say that I'm going to be learning about the bigger picture of this as I speak about it, or probably right after I speak about it and I see what's come through my mouth. So, let's see. We got Betrayal, Incompatible, Anubis, Free Spirit, Ariadne, Travel, Activation, Crescent Moon, and Reputation. So the person I am today would not be having the experiences that the person I was had. But the person I am today is who I am because I had those experiences. So, I don't want to hate on myself for having this experience. I obviously planned this as part of the experiences that I would have in this lifetime. And I think what I've realized now, why I can kind of see it the way I'm seeing it now, is because I've realized that I've sort of been, most recently in my journey, integrating with other versions of myself who had these, similar experiences on other timelines, from different perspectives. So I didn't have to, live it out several times. I lived it out several times at the same time, and now I'm taking all that data into me now to integrate. And all the misunderstandings, though, That's why you see me with a straggling stream of pride to clear up, like in the last day or two when I posted that video. It's because it's from another timeline. And just makes so much more sense to me when I understand this part. Like, I wasn't feeling lost or anything, but kind of just the bigger picture just clicked in for me when I realized, oh, these are other aspects of me that lived on other timelines. Other decisions were made with similar experiences. Okay, so betrayal. One of the coping mechanisms that I picked up for living through the dysfunctional relating that I was brought into in this lifetime, in this family that I was brought into, was people pleasing. And in my family, there was just a lot of chaos because my father was emotionally dysregulated, which meant my mother was emotionally dysregulated. My father was physically abusive, and which meant my mother was always upset. There was a lack of money, so there were a lot of fights about that. So there was a feeling of instability generally. And it wasn't, although my mom did read books to me when I was very young, right? Like, I don't know how regular it was. I don't remember it. I've seen pictures of it. My mom, there's no doubt in my mind that my mom loves us. And at the same time, my household growing up was so chaotic that in order to survive that as a child, there was no like space for me to flourish as me. It was kind of like a child in that household fell to the background. Physical needs were met, but emotional needs and like as far as like getting to know me as a person, getting to know me happened as a byproduct of just trying to keep me out of the way of the chaos. How did I react to that? You know? And I think I was very docile, and I was very willing to do what I was supposed to do in order to be thought favorably of. But what happened was I lost myself. Like it didn't really matter who I was, what I wanted, or anything like that. Life became about managing how my mother felt and not doing the things that made her mad at me. Not doing the things that made anyone mad at me. And for me, growing up, it was just a lot of being ushered this way and that way, you know, through the chaotic lives that we were living, which included, you know, a divorce and an attempted kidnapping and threats to our lives and escaping to another state and witnessing my father's suicide. So after that, the coping mechanisms that I brought forth into like my preteen years, which is when I was expected to start doing chores and things like that, right? Helping with in the household. My mom grew up as one of 11 children, and so helping out in the household was definitely part of what she learned was appropriate for being in a family. And you can imagine that when you're one of 11 children, honestly, the parents would never have time for all of the children. They would have to manage it like a business. Like everyone's got a job, a role, and expectations of them. And if you know anything about the paradigm I'm talking about with fair relating and the transition we're moving towards, it's the opposite of that. We're not meant to have expectations of people and all this, but this is the evolution of what I'm coming out of, right? So my mom also managed me that way, but because my emotional body was not tended to during a time I was expected to do chores, and it was like I was literally just used like a slave. And I could be suicidal, slitting my wrists in my bedroom, and then be called to do the dishes. No one's checking on me in my room. No one knows that I'm doing this. No one cares that I'm doing this. And now I'm going to go stick my hands in this hot soapy water to do some dishes and feel the sting of the slices that I've been putting in my wrist. And the reason why I'm explaining it that way is to just kind of show, like, I was there in the household. My mom was there. She was managing the household, but like because of the way she grew up, I don't think it was even abnormal for her to think that, you know, that would be the way to manage me. Like, whereas, you know, other people who had one-on-one time with their parent who actually cared to get to know them, their likes, dislikes, skills, you know, things like that. It might have been something more like, you know, well, how are you doing? And would you mind helping me with the dishes? But that was not what my life was like. It was like, no, you do the dishes. And I didn't try to make excuses because I was a people pleaser and I just had to do what Mom wanted me to do because I didn't like when Mom was mad at me. It took until I was about 40 to start saying no to my mom. I know that sounds really weird. I'm only 47. But I think that it was part of the evolution of my healing. But I think that it really hit me when one time I shared with my brother that I had told Mom no when she asked me something. And he was like, nuh-uh. And right in that moment, it made me realize, oh my God, like he's known all along. He's known all along that I was just Mom's yes man. Wow. Because I didn't know. I hadn't known. I hadn't seen myself from that angle because I was trying to survive. And if I look back, there were some things my mom asked me to do that I would never choose to do on my own. I didn't like having to do. There were times that I had to remove a crappy boyfriend out of my mom's life by yelling at him and scaring him away and chasing him down the road and telling him to leave. Like, that was one time. But things like that I should not have to do. Things like being upset at other people who she enabled to wrong her. And I say she enabled to wrong her because I like to take responsibility for my stuff. So I'm not going to tell you the story and make her the victim in the story like she might if she were to tell the story. So anyway, it went on like that for a long time because like I literally couldn't bear to have the feeling of my mom not liking me. And if I didn't do the thing that she wanted, then I felt like she didn't like me. Like I would get kind of like a disapproval or a coldness, or it wouldn't be as important to her. And it really hurt. And I was doing everything I could to avoid that hurt, I guess, for a long time. And it seems so silly now, right? Like, but when I grew up the way I grew up, I was not my own person. I was an extension of my mother. That is what I was. And when you do the research on narcissism, which I eventually did do later, much later, you learn that that's actually how narcissism works, is that the children often become just an extension of the parent, an accessory sometimes, a slave sometimes, the representative of the glory that the narcissistically coping person is. And yeah, so that's how I grew up. So because I grew up that way, when it came time to get in a relationship, now here's another aspect of me growing up. Yes, my mom was one of 11 children. Now, it's going to sound like I'm talking about a completely different family now when I say this, but these things are all true too. My mom's parents were together, faithful to each other, and never divorced. My mom's mom stayed home with the children. My mom's dad worked and supported them all. And when the older children got old enough to work, they worked too to help support the family. So there was this sort of fairy tale, happily ever after, find your true love and get married and be together kind of way of navigating. Like, so my mom went through life assuming that that would be her path too. And that wasn't her path, right? Because, well, I won't go into kind of the details of what her thing is, right? That wasn't her path. Obviously, my father passed on. She needed to divorce him even before that time because, you know, he was very wounded and damaged from his earlier childhood and life, which was way more dysfunctional than my mother's. So my mom's family's most detrimental ways were to run the family like a business, which does lose that ability to take into consideration who the children are. So yeah, it does break some bonds. It does foster disconnection. My dad's family was much more overtly, actively violent, abusive. There was divorce. I believe my grandmother may have been married 4 times and had daughters by 4 different men. And my grandfather on my father's side would actively beat them. And it was said that my father mostly witnessed it and didn't get as many of the beatings, which is an interesting thing because of something later that happened in my more immediate family. I learned that when somebody witnesses violent crimes against another that they love, they don't have the benefit of the adrenaline that the person getting beaten has to protect them from the incident. So the witness can sometimes be more detrimentally damaged from witnessing a violent crime against someone they love than the actual victim of the crime. So I think that could have stood true for my father. He was, if you looked at my father's astrology chart, he was Pisces and Cancer. Pisces and Cancer. And if you know about these energies, they're water signs, they're emotions, they're feelings, they're deep. They're caring, they're nurturing. But my father was a 6'4" man, and he had witnessed all that violence, and then he did go into the military, and I don't think that went very well for him. I've read essays that he wrote where he wanted to leave. He didn't agree with the tactics the military uses to train, brainwash the soldiers. But they wouldn't let him leave. He tried to escape, so he was mistreated and eventually discharged after being forced to complete boot camp. So I know that there's some sort of contracts and agreements, and you know, I understand that he signed something and said that that's what he would do, but I think it's pretty dangerous probably to force somebody to stay when they know they can't, they're not cut up out for it, but hey. Anyways, the reason I mention it is because I know that was a lot of what shaped him too, right? Like, broke him. And I haven't really this deeply thought about my dad in a long time, and I do feel tears welling up, and I don't want to stifle them, so I'm just going to allow it a little bit if it wants to come out. I was just thinking, like, gosh, I really miss him. And I don't usually think that, so I'm pretty sure this is me integrating from another timeline, because haven't felt detriment by the loss of my father um, in a lot of years, you know? And maybe I never got to mourn him because it was such a relief when that chaos left our lives. And life didn't get quite easier though, because there was all the residual programming from having grown up that way to deal with. And then we were eventually put into a situation with a stepfather. So my mom did remarry. And I think it was really overall very beneficial to us because even though our stepfather did not understand us, he was parented a completely different way, tried to parent us in a very harsh way for children who had been traumatized, was very unkind with his words, very high expectations for our performance in the home, and what chores we would be expected to do, and the punishments that we would endure due to not living up to the expectations were in some ways more psychologically damaging than strenuously hard, but they were physical, laborious punishments, like restack that pile of wood over there for no fucking reason, except for you're punished. And that's due to his own childhood and his own ideas, but like he couldn't have known, I guess. He also did have a military background, though, I believe. But he couldn't have known really what to do about traumatized children or the depths that we were traumatized to. So I'm gonna give him the benefit of the doubt and know that he did his best. And I really appreciate that we were moved out of the city into the very rural area. And even though there's a part of me that's really sad that the theme of my childhood is go play, because it just shows how we were just sort of always pushed to the background. I really am glad that I got to go play on that land when we got to the woods, when we got to the 8 acres of land where he owned, and we were told to go play. I got to play in the woods by myself, usually building little forts. My sister and brother usually banded together more, and I was usually more on my own. And every once in a while, my sister would come to my side, I guess you could say. And it would be like a war, basically, between me and my brother. I guess I never really realized that until this moment that maybe we were replaying what we had learned. Gosh, I really love my brother, you know? And I know he loves me. He's a really, really good person. And he's not afraid to be mean either. Which was kind of like the topic that I wanted to talk about when I started this. I wanted to talk about betrayal and how I've handled it. And the reason I needed to preface it was because I kind of wanted to share like what created me into this person who I kind of went into my adulthood with all these kind of ideas, right, that I've given you preface of. So when I got with my first boyfriend, stayed with him 6 years and we had 3 kids. Like, you know, I had that idea of a fantasy, happily ever after. This is, you know, this is it. And I did get betrayed through infidelity and really through my own stupidity. But I didn't know what I didn't know, right? I had to learn these lessons the hard way. And I think that was the first time when he so I'm going to skip over a chunk of the chaos that I lived out due to the trauma, the chaotic trauma that I was programmed with as a child. I was living out those traumas, you know, in my early adulthood. And so I'm going to skip to the part where I say, like, he took my children. My children, when he gained custody of my children through lies that were told and so on and so forth, and the judicial system generally being just inadequate in situations like this, that was the first time I knew that I could want to kill somebody. And I remember it surprised me. Because, you know, because I took on that role growing up where I was there to please my mother, I looked at myself as a good person for that, you know? Like, I see now how silly and cute and flawed that is. But that's how I was going through life, is as long as my mom's okay with me, I'm okay. And, yeah. So, of course, I didn't act on it. I didn't, you know, keep entertaining the thoughts or make a plan or anything. I just remember being surprised when I literally had the thought come in and felt the realness of it. So anyways, suppressed it all back down and continued on as a good girl after, you know, lots and lots more chaos and breakdowns, and eventually going through 7 years where I couldn't leave the house and blah, 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 blah. You know, I'm skipping like the most chaotic part of my life to get to this other thing that I wanted to talk about, okay? Just saying. So if you've watched other videos and you've heard me say other things and you're like, well, why isn't she mentioning that this time? And it's like, well, because I'm skipping a lot. We would be here a long time if I were to talk about each, you know, trauma and chaos and chapter of my life. I am a Scorpio, so it's like a lot of having to surrender and being reborn, having to surrender and being reborn. Dark nights of the soul. Oh, I've had many. Okay, so fast forward to I'm starting to come out of things, right? I'm getting really practiced with what I've learned about spirituality and how I have more control over what life I live than I thought. Not necessarily breaking out of that thing where I people please with my mother yet, but definitely breaking out of people pleasing with everybody else. My mother was the last one to go when it came to that. But by the way, as a side note, I did have a lot of time with my mother yesterday, and I was really impressed with myself. Just must say. Anyway, like just handling the whole everything very smoothly in order to facilitate a pleasant visit, despite lots of little things. Okay, so anyway, I come into this relationship, and in this relationship, I'm being betrayed. But I'm also a people pleaser. I'm also don't know myself. I'm also just beginning this spiritual journey. And this was the beginning of me learning this lesson about handling betrayal. And and handling myself in a world that has people who would betray me. Because I wanted to be good, right? I had grown up witnessing a violent father who was bad. And I did not want to be that. I wanted to be nice. I wanted to be good. And I didn't want any trouble. And so I really did navigate life through that lens for so long. And like, even when it was shown to me, even when tarot started telling me much, much later, like, no, hey, you might have to like lash back. When I let myself do it a little bit at the end of the relationship where I was betrayed, at the end of the relationship, he moved into my home. So it was right in my face and I had proof and I couldn't deny it anymore that he was behind my back with other women. And I was just like, all right, you gotta leave. And then he told me that he would leave on his own time. And then I fucking flipped and I started hitting the wall with a pan and I was yelling at him and I was like, nope, you're leaving right fucking now. Get the fuck out. Done here. And it was like one of the first times I really stuck up for myself in a way. Without being in a trigger, really. It was like actual, I'm determined to make this happen for myself and to protect myself. It wasn't like I was triggered into a rage. It wasn't like that. So, interesting. So, but afterwards, I still didn't like it. I apologized to him many, many times about behaving in that way because I had wished I did it more maturely, right? So again, I suppressed and denied the anger and the ability to be aggressive that I have in me. Go through some more of life. And eventually I encounter people who are gossipy, backstabby, trying to put dirt on my name and, like feel jealous and envy and, evil eye, all kinds of that kind of, and still taking the high road. And I'm like, yeah, like I get it, like you're just having an issue. Like I don't take the road where I take revenge or anything, and I still don't agree with that. But if you've been watching, do you remember a few months ago when I said, well, like finally had to start killing a few ants and like telling them to go away, and now they're much less in my place. And I was taking that like as, oh yeah, I guess here's an example of how Spirit is showing me like you do need to put your foot down sometimes. And even with the ants, up until the point where I finally killed some, I was very reluctant to. I didn't want to. I was just brushing them off places. And I mean, I feel a little silly telling you this right now, right? Because I don't know, I just don't like war. I don't like conflict. I don't like it. But I do see that it's necessary sometimes in the lower realms. And that's why I just didn't want to live in the lower realms. And that's why I was just like, yeah, I'll do my shadow work and get the fuck out of here. Like, I'll just live up there, like in the higher realms where you don't deal with that bullshit, right? But little did I know I couldn't get to the higher realms without actually learning the thing that I came to learn in this lifetime, which was that I can clap back, that I can stand my ground. And when I say clap back, I mean like, don't take it in, just like, and that if someone's coming for me, that it is appropriate to do so. That I don't have to alchemize all their bullshit, right? That I don't have to let the ants take over my home. They can go back to theirs. And I feel like if I were to look back, like if I were to think about how I'm navigating life now, given what I've learned, I would say that at the first sign of betrayal, that's when I know I'm incompatible with somebody. They've betrayed me. Now we are incompatible. The only way that I can be compatible with somebody who betrays me is if I become incompatible with myself. If I betray myself. I can only stay with someone who betrayed me if I betray myself. And when it comes to, weighing your heart at the end of a lifetime to see if it's as light as a feather, allowing self to be betrayed weighs heavy on the heart. So if I'm going through life and I'm like, oh, I'm just like a good girl, and even if someone betrays me, I don't get even. I don't take revenge on them. So I'm going to heaven. I know I'm going to heaven. And I get to heaven, and they put my heart on the scale, and my heart is so heavy because I betrayed myself by staying in situations where I was being betrayed. It's that important. That important. It's not a choice. Like it's not a sacrifice that should be made. Sometimes I'll listen to other people's perspectives about relationships, and just because I want to consider other perspectives. I know that I don't know it all, and I've yet to have a successful, happy relationship where I know both parties are being good to each other. So I can't speak to that, right? But I'm gathering knowledge, and I have a lot of wisdom about what doesn't work. That's where I'm at with it. But when I hear things like, oh, you compromise, or there's a certain level of sacrifice, I'm like, no. No. I will not. I don't want to. And maybe it's just because the difference is I don't believe I have to, because I am going up to these other realms. And it's like, well, if we're living there, then we're not talking about sacrifice anymore. We're not talking about compromise. We're talking about two people who are sovereign, who know themselves, who respect themselves, therefore respect each other and everyone, who are living for the one win-win-win, who are conscious creators, who have open hearts. And I think everything from there just falls into place. I feel like all these other bullshit things that I've lived out up until now are not a thing. Like Ariadne. The mythology of Ariadne talks about how she rescues so-and-so from the labyrinth. And then when he gets well and healed, he leaves her. But she loves him. And then she gets resentful. So in the story, whenever that card comes out of my oracle, I kind of think like, well, if she was just loving herself and didn't give with expectation, then she would be fine when the guy left. And that's kind of how I feel like it is. Like, what I've learned is that it could only ever be a story of me giving myself away, like sacrificing a part of myself for a later reward of a relationship that would work out. Like, I think there was an earlier version of me that found that story, the idea of Ariadne without the betrayal at the end, really appealing. The idea of, meeting a guy who wasn't yet aware of how to live out his potential, but I knew he had some because I can see it. And then, like, walking beside him while he figures himself out and sheds himself of all that's untruth about him and catches up to where I am, essentially. I liked that idea. I thought that was great. But that was because I just didn't think there were any guys that could match me. I thought I would have to settle, And now I don't think that. Now I don't even care to settle. Now I just won't settle. I would rather be alone than settle now. But it took me taking back that responsibility for protecting myself, essentially. Because protecting is the masculine's role. And if I don't have a masculine next to me to protect me, I'm going to have to protect myself, aren't I? And yeah, I prefer to be in feminine energy. Yeah, I'm here to be a feminine. But I do need to be able to protect myself if there's no masculine that has my back. And even if there is a masculine who has my back, I want to be able to be sovereign, right? And if there is a masculine walking beside me, I want him to be able to trust his own intuition. I don't want him to have to lean on my intuition all the time. I don't want to have to be the one who reminds him that he's in a shadow that needs to have his attention. I want his own guidance to tell him that. Like that we are both fully matured, responsible beings walking through life. And me being able to protect myself is part of that. Like, yeah. What else here? The word I'm like looking like the word reputation. Why is that here? I think it's just here because like part of being good is being seen as good, right? And say my ex just goes around and tells people the story about how I kicked him out of my house very angrily, like very angrily. And he like dirties up my reputation there and doesn't tell like the whole other story, and people don't really know me. So they just like picture me and violence as one. It's like, what am I going to do? You know? My reputation is irrelevant, I believe, at this point, you know? I mean, I do get that reputation is an important thing because if in my career, of course, I want my reputation to precede me. I want people to understand that what I have to offer is valuable, because otherwise they would not compensate me for it, right? But I kind of think that my energy can speak for me. I don't think I need to worry about the perceptions of other people because we already know that our perceptions can all be warped. But the truth will prevail, right? Like the truth lies underneath. So I'm going to go with that on there. Let's see what else. Oh, like travel. Oh. So my reputation could only be held up around the group of people that in this example, I don't know that he did this, that my ex would have told and associated me with violence to. But if I were to travel, say I go to another area, across the country, another country, my reputation doesn't exist there, you know? Now it's my energy speaking for me again. So perhaps reputation is a thing that can kind of be a limitation. I see. I'm going to start talking about this and I don't know exactly where it's going, but it's going to start with sort of a confession. But one of the ways that I tried to protect myself initially when that ex betrayed me and I wanted him out of my house was to threaten his reputation. I threatened to tell people about what he had done to me. Interesting. Okay, so I don't know what I'm talking about here yet. I'm just going to keep talking. I'm going to share some tidbits of information that are just coming like a channel. I witnessed later, after our breakup, maybe even 2 years after our breakup, maybe a year, whatever, the group of people that would know us-ish, you know, on the surface level, he was still around them. And something happened between him and another woman in that group. Apparently that woman tried to break up a fight that he was in with his girlfriend. in a public setting, and he like harmed her, pushed her, so the story goes. And then she went and started telling people. So told people that he was violent. I remember reading a Facebook post that she made about him being a woman beater and all this stuff. And I knew he wasn't a woman beater. At least he didn't beat me. And someone from that group actually called and asked me. Said, hey, did you hear what's going on? I'm like, I didn't know it was about him when the girl posted it, but my intuition told me it was. Oddly, you know? So I kind of knew what was going to be told to me. And I was like, I got an inkling. And then she confirmed that she was calling because this was going on and they were excluding him from their group. And I don't know if she just wanted me to know so I could be like included in the group again, or if they just were trying to get to the bottom of what kind of person he is, or if they were doubting what this other girl was saying. But I told her the truth, which was, no, he's not a woman beater. He never beat me. I think there was one time when I grabbed his phone. I was at the time still trying to get proof. So I grabbed his phone to look at it, and he hit me in the back of the head to try to get his phone back. So, I mean, I did bring that on myself. But other than that, he never did touch me, but there was a fight that I witnessed, and he told me afterwards that that was the first fight he'd ever been in. So I don't think violence was his first thing, unless it was unleashed after me, you know. But I told her, no, I've never had that experience with him. I don't see him that way. I don't think it's in him. But it could be. All right, reputation. Let's see. Oh. So reputation is relevant when you're in the lower realms. When you're in the hell realm, like all the lower density loops that we get in, right? That's where reputation matters, because your reputation for how that loop is what keeps you in whatever your reputation is about that thing. Oh. So, in my last video, I remember saying, like, if you hold a judgment against somebody and they're growing out of that, then they have to leave your life because you've got them in a box. So it's kind of like the reputation is the thing where some person is looking at another person and they're assuming they're one way that they knew them to be at some time. But if that person breaks out of that loop, they may no longer be that thing. So, reputation is a limitation. Reputation is a limitation. Peppercorn from my breakfast just came out of my tooth. I've had juice, an egg sandwich, and now I'm having iced coffee. Okay. So what I've learned about reputation is it doesn't really matter, you know? Reputation is like sacrifice and compromise. It's like that's only if you're having to live in those lower realms. Okay. Is there anything else here about reputation? Because I feel like my conclusion is lackluster. Missed opportunity. I might have a reputation for being people's missed opportunity. That's because I did hold space for men who, if they wanted to get on the journey, if they wanted to clear themselves up, that they could have stood beside me. But since they didn't, they missed that opportunity. And now I've kind of upped my standards. New story. Non-attachment. Got worry in 9 to 10 months. What's here? Clytia, euphrosine, and melpomene. This is saying worry about unrequited love for 9 to 10 months is a missed opportunity. Oh. Let's see. Oh. So while staying in a relationship where there's been betrayal that you're not compatible with, you miss opportunities. Because you're staying in a situation where you're not loving yourself, so it's unrequited love. And on top of that, you miss all the opportunities that you could have had. I think you would also miss opportunities if you were waiting for somebody to catch up with you energetically. Oh, or demanding them to. Yeah, you can't. Okay. Non-attachment. Okay, so it's like if, say there was a man who wasn't quite where I am spiritually, hasn't done his shadow work yet, needed to do a lot of shadow work to be where I'm at, like to function in such a way where he would take responsibility for himself instead of being codependent in any way or any of those old kind of ways of relating, right? If I were to take the stance, and I did with that guy originally, Yes, I did this with my ex. So here's something else I've learned. I was demanding that I was definitely expecting, and it probably felt like demanding. Yes, I was demanding, because I was definitely wanting to leave if this wasn't the case. But like, do your shadow work or this is over. And this is saying like non-attachment would be the way to go, right? Like, we don't control others, so you can't really tell him what to do. You can discern what you should do given what he's doing, and then you'll be a lot happier because you're not fighting against what is, which is he's not doing the shadow work and he's betraying you. So instead of trying to demand that he shape up so you don't have to ship out, just ship out. Not compatible. And okay, so the foundations of being able to operate in this way are self-esteem, are knowing who I am. And because of the way I grew up, I didn't have that. So that's why I found myself in the relationships I was in. Oh, maybe I'm sharing this for others who find themselves in these relationships and maybe would benefit from understanding a bigger picture of what I've found in my journey of like things that lent towards me being in those situations, because Tropos is cut it off. Because if you don't know why you're in the situation and you keep going back and you think, I'd rather be in this dysfunctional relationship than alone, you might not understand it's because you may not have attachment, or you may not know your own identity, I want to say. You may be living in coping mechanisms due to the household you grew up in. And once you eliminate those, once you regain your own sense of self, make different decisions. You won't sell yourself short. And that's why I do what I do. That's why I share what I share, because that's why I share the formula I share about cleaning up the backlog and cleaning up the shadow and creating 0 point in the field of any loop that you're in by acknowledging, validating, accepting, and being present with the feelings. Why I do that is because to me, getting in touch with me, who I am, was freeing. And I'm here for freedom. And while I say, oh, I'd make different decisions now, given the circumstances, given what I know now, it also stands true that the whole process that I went through was what made it so that I can make these decisions and know myself. It's like the poison was the antidote. Living out the program that I was downloaded with as a child, which is what that was, also allowed me to look at the situation, dissect it, analyze it, learn what I had to from it in order to be free of it, with this more mature mind, which was likely well developed because of my need to observe, because of my need to discern what was going on in my life, because there's always chaos. There's always something I've got to be alert about, you know? So my mind was always taking things in and trying to make sense of them. And taking a lot of things in from a lot of different angles, you know? And like I said, now I'm kind of putting this all together with different timelines that I've lived similar experiences on, and being able to talk about it in a more cohesive way instead of just little bits of the story where you get like an angle like, oh, this is an experience I had, this is how I cleared it. That's great, and I think that's very helpful for anyone who needs the inspiration to know that they can do it too. But I think here, now, without even realizing I was going to do it, I shared a more, like a bigger picture of what that process looked like for me. Like, I'm downloaded as a child with the program that says I'm going to go into life with this fairy tale idea about how I want to live, with this misunderstanding about who I am, and with this desire to be looked at like a good girl. And I see what that's like. It's like going into a boxing ring without knowing that you're going to go into a boxing ring. And all of a sudden you're just like getting hit and you're just like, oh wait, what's going on here? And it would look really bad for you until you started putting your fists up, you know, until you started ducking. So yeah, I had to learn to duck. But if you're not even in your body when you get into that ring and you're just kind of looking at yourself take these hits, and you don't want to be looked at like a fighter, you don't want to beat that person up, you don't want to hurt them, harm them. So I think this guy has stopped in my driveway. So don't want to be looked at a certain way, so it's like, can I really take up the gloves in this fight? Can I really assert myself in this way? Because now there's this thing, like, and it's like, had to get to know who I really am in order to take that up and be like, yeah, I am worthy of living, protecting myself where it's needed, asserting myself, sharing myself, and I actually don't need anybody in my life that doesn't want to do that too. You know, I love them, I don't condemn them, I would help anyone, but I'm not going to sacrifice myself for them, you know, because I am worth it too, and it would never benefit them to do, unless it's my children, I will say, you know, and only to a degree. When I'm talking about sacrifice and it comes to my children, I'm talking about sacrificing my time for them when they're younger and they need my care before I need to, you know, go shopping. Like, their care comes first. I mean, like that, you know. I mean, like, maybe a sacrifice for my desires and wants. I know that this guy's gonna come bug me at this time, so I'm gonna wrap this up. But the last thing that came out of the box is resources. So that's what this is. That's what I'm always providing, is just a resource. And I'm glad to do it, and thanks for listening. I'm glad to have the platform to express on. See you next time.